An interesting story developing out of Vermont concerning YouTuber that probably a lot of you watch. I definitely have been watching him for almost 2 years now, probably maybe even longer than 2 years. Um, Tarl Warwick, aka Sticks Hex and Hammer 666, is has apparently declared for governor of New York and or sorry, governor of Vermont. I am going to talk about the New York gubernatorial election too in a second, but it's pretty much one of the best pieces of news lately, and I think that it's pretty much this is somebody I can almost automatically endorse him. I wouldn't say that on every single issue out there to talk about I necessarily agree with um, Tarl Warwick, but there are certain there's a certain attitude that he brings to the table that I think will probably completely change everything about electoral politics in the U.S. if he gets elected governor of Vermont. Now, I wrote an article a couple weeks ago that was basically, well, it might have been last week, that talked about the 6 key races and candidates in the 2018 election. So it was the 6 key candidates, the most interesting ones. And one of them was this Iron Stash, Randy Bryce, who has been featured a lot on Jimmy Dore and some progressive shows. And he was running against Paul Ryan. And for a long time, I was like, well, it looks like he could gain a lot of support and outperform any other Democrat who would have run over there. I don't think he can win the race. Well, Paul Ryan's gone. Now he's retired, and Randy Bryce could get elected. Not that I would want him to get elected. I'm actually pretty much against most of Randy Bryce's platform. But like I said, this is a guy who would get elected and change the tone of decision making in Congress. If he was given a platform to talk in Congress, I guarantee you, the character and tone of Congress would change if Randy Bryce were to be elected. Same thing with Tarl Warwick as governor of Vermont, and I might have to actually update that article because it pretty much the other candidates I talked about, Dennis Kucinich, for example, was an elected official for I think decades in the Cleveland and Ohio, or actually Cleveland and in Washington. He was a mayor, he was a congressman. So even though he's a very interesting candidate, he's not a new face in politics. He's simply a little unconventional. And then there's a few other candidates that I featured that are a little more outside the box. Omar Navarro, who's basically just he's really kind of just a Republican stand-in who's just got a fuck you attitude in California. But policy-wise, I don't really think he brings much to the table, with all due respect. Then there's Larry Sharp, libertarian candidate in New York, who I said was probably a better alternative than the Republican. So, there's certainly candidates out there that are trying to break the mold. Massachusetts, there's a guy, V.A. Shiva, who is he was actually on Sticks, Hex, and Hammer's feed once. They were talking for over an hour. Fantastic candidate who is an independent, Indian American, was born in India, came here, developed several businesses, made some money. There's a few independent candidates. This one though, Tarl Warwick for Vermont, would be really the keystone of them all, of all the either independent or insurgent candidacies in the country. And there's a few reasons why. Now his platform, he says no pay as governor and no pension. He says he has some income. That's some ballsy thing to say. He said, I will, if elected, refuse to enforce gun control and he wants the legislator to reverse it. So yeah, I'm in favor of that. If elected, we will fight the opiate crisis by instructing the legislature to consider decriminalizing all drugs within the state for minor possession, so that addicts can seek treatment without stigma. So he's a big drug anti-prohibitionist. I mean, what can you? I mean, if a lot of the policies he has here are basically ones that he's had for years. He says, I will never join a political party while serving in office and remain an independent. If elected, I will not stop doing my normal gubernatorial work to campaign for re-election. I will simply tell people whether or not I am running. I would attend scheduled to. So he's not committing even to running for re-election. Now in Vermont, they have gubernatorial elections every 2 years. He said, number 5, I will veto any tax hikes and any opaque legislation that is overly long or convoluted. That's great. He said, number 6, I will use my online presence and presence as governor to argue in favor of the debate commission opening up to minor party candidates and to encourage the abolition of super PACs and corporate campaign donations to try and save our republic. Now, looking at this race at the moment, he's got a very, I mean, I wouldn't say that he has an odds-on victory here, but it's going to be difficult for people to avoid giving him attention right now because, first of all, the current governor of Vermont is Phil Scott, who if you watch Styx's channel, he talks about pretty frequently. So there's a lot of people out there who know who Phil Scott is, that a few years ago they couldn't give a shit who was the governor of Vermont. Well, because Styx Hexenhammer is probably the most well-known media personality in Vermont, nationwide, a lot of people know that Phil Scott just he's not that good. he's kind of like a I don't know. He's just not even, he's not going to be a very popular candidate this year. So there's already people who have declared against him, including a Democratic state senator could be coming in next, according to the information I have. And there's a lot of Democrats that are potential candidates that are not really good, including a middle school student, which is great. Which would just, if that type of stuff happened, where there's more people who jump in and they're like, oh, we're going to basically mess up the race. Yeah, the Tarl Warwick could probably easily start to shoot ahead of the other candidates, especially if Phil Scott decides not to run. And there's other people, there's a Progressive Party, there's the Liberty Union Party, I know in Vermont, which has never won anything, but they're part of the fringe left over there. Yeah, and he's already, here's the advantage of him in terms of what he could do. He's already one of the most well-cited YouTube creators in politics that there are right now. It's mostly because of his predictions during the 2016 race that many people were saying, "Oh, you're full of shit the whole time." No, he would probably, now that he's become kind of a name among people who are on the internet who share a lot of material. He has a very distinct advantage in the state of Vermont. People like to think, oh, well, so what if he's on the internet? Vermont, if you have, I mean, let's see, the population of the state of Vermont is, I think it's like less than 1 million. You got population, yeah, it's 624,000 people compared to, I think, like 19 million in New York. So it's ranked next to last in the country in terms of states with population. And Styx Hexenhammer has a YouTube following of over 220,000 people who subscribe to his channel, and most of them tune into at least a few of his videos a week. Now, that's just on YouTube. His platform on his presence on other platforms is also just growing and growing and growing. He's becoming sort of like the just like a parallel media for the state of, well, not just the state of Vermont, for a lot of other places. And he's very in tune about where to get his information, and yet does he always get things the way that I would look at them? Absolutely not. But he always puts forth a message that people know is well thought out and based on a lot of sound research. And that's another thing that I think it certainly sets him apart from the majority of candidates that are out there, is that Styx Hexenhammer is also kind of a scholar in many fields. He you could say he's like one of those Renaissance mans or Renaissance men or the man for all seasons. Look, there's and there's all those videos that he does with the cult, and he's standing outside with the dagger or something. All those memes about him. There's a lot of Styx memes already out there. So there's, believe it or not, the advertisements or I mean, I guess the negative material is already out there too. I mean, there's plenty of things that he said in the past that are really out there or whatever. And people bring up, I think in the past he used to have this belief that the Holocaust didn't happen, which is kind of it's bizarre given that he's he's so spot on other topics. But I'm going to contrast that with what's happening in New York City and New York State. You have people that have been politicians their entire lives who are completely clueless about what really are the issues nowadays. You have Governor Cuomo running around the state talking about how he can spend more money, how he can raise taxes more, how he can do things that are more invasive of people's privacy, and pretending to be a political progressive in some ways, and in other ways really going overboard, like with his college policy, which is going to bankrupt the state and drive even more businesses out. That's the governor of New York, and he's running for a third term. And even with all the stuff that's going on, and all of the new wrenches that have been thrown into his campaign, he's still probably going to get elected. I think I have a story. Let me see here. From Wall Street Journal, where he basically, here we go. He defrauded a Catholic charity, basically. It's For a while, I was using a lot of archive links like Styx does, but I'm so swamped I don't even have time to do that. Damn it. Well, I guess we're gonna have to do the archive link live, so because of the fucking paywalls. So it's like one of Styx occult hexes. Like, I don't want to archive the page, but something compelled me to do it, like some sort of hex. So yeah, here we go. Cuomo loots of Catholic charity. So Governor Andrew Cuomo has a disturbing new way to raise revenue using government muscle to squeeze private organizations into voluntarily writing billion-dollar checks. That's what he did to Fidelis Care, a nonprofit health plan affiliated with the Catholic Church and its would-be buyer Centene Corporation. In a murky deal announced on Good Friday, Fidelis and Centene agreed to pay the state $2 billion over 4 years. The payments are not technically required by law, but Fidelis and Centene agreed to them after a 3-month pressure campaign by Mr. Cuomo, including overt and implied threats to seize the funds, block the sale, or both. Fidelis would seem an odd target for a gubernatorial money grab. Founded in 1993, it specializes in health coverage for the poor. With 1.6 million members, it is the largest purveyor of state-sponsored programs such as Medicaid managed care, Child Health Plus, and the Essential Plan, as well as Medicare Advantage and commercial Obamacare coverage. It has played a big role in reducing the state's uninsured rate and has not been publicly accused of wrongdoing. What sparked Mr. Cuomo's campaign was Fidelis's pending sale to Centenny, announced in September for a price of $3.75 billion. The bishops plan to put the money into a charitable foundation in support of health care for the needy. Mr. Cuomo argued that the state was entitled to $3 billion of the proceeds because Fidelis earned most of its revenue from state programs. By that logic, the state could skim the savings accounts of public employees when they retire. He also said that's pretty funny. Well, let me think. Hold on. Because Fidelis earned most of its. Yeah, I mean, technically, they're completely right. He also cited the precedent of Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, which yielded billions to the state when it converted to for-profit status in the mid-2000s. But that was a unique transaction under a narrowly tailored law that applies to no other company. Despite lacking a legal claim to the money, Mr. Cuomo pursued it aggressively. Bills he submitted to the legislature would not only have seized 80% of the proceeds from the sale, but also raided Fidelis' reserve accounts if the deal were canceled. The bishops would have paid either way. The sale needed regulatory approval from two state agencies, the Departments of Health and Financial Services, leaving it vulnerable to delay or rejection by Mr. Cuomo's appointees. In the face of a three-way bind and with no meaningful support from either party in the legislature, Fidelis and Centenny agreed to give up $2 billion over 4 years, including $1.35 billion this year. The Bishop's Charitable Foundation is left with $3.2 billion, including both sale proceeds and surplus cash. And Centenny salvages an expansion that has been well received on Wall Street. But the state's end of the deal creates the ugly appearance that regulatory approval of the Fidelis Centenny sale had been bartered for a 10-figure sum. A final disturbing twist is where the state's $2 billion is destined to go, into a healthcare transformation fund into which the governor's budget director can dip without even notifying the legislature or the public for 15 days. So Mr. Cuomo is diverting money otherwise meant for charity to furnish himself with $1.35 billion to spend as he wishes in an election year. What innocent but deep-pocketed organization will be next? So, I don't know what Empire Center is, which is where this guy works, but just analyze that. The two companies, one of them is selling this asset, and the state says, well, we're going to take $3 billion of that sale, and we're just going to take it, and that's it. No, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous, and that's the type of state that Andrew Cuomo is running, and you might think, oh, that's a good thing because it's a fat cat organization and whatever. No, he's going to use that money for some sort of hole in the ground that he's going to use for a photo op, and nobody's going to benefit from that. And that's kind of why I think Sharp for governor would be better. Now, the other Democratic candidate in New York is Cynthia Nixon. There's another pretty funny incident with her. Where did that go? Cynthia Nixon. Here it is. But she says upstate New York begins around Ithaca. Now, I'm not really from New York State, but here this guy says, in the greatest professional disappointment of my life, the New York Times asked Cynthia Nixon where upstate New York begins before I had a chance to. Her answer was unique. So, Ithaca, New York, let's show it on a map. Ithaca on a map. I'm gonna. I think it was over here. So, upstate New York, that's not really but you can see, here's my cursor. That's Ithaca. Upstate New York actually begins probably around there, you know, New York State and upstate New York. And I don't care. I mean, people say, "Oh, you know what Wikipedia is." So, I mean, Wikipedia, anybody can manipulate it. Well, um, there's the Hudson Valley, which is kind of the border. It's borderline what the Hudson Valley is, whether it's upstate or downstate New York. But once you get above Hudson Valley, it's pretty much upstate New York. There's the Capital District, which is Albany over here. That's for sure not downstate New York. And then you have the Adirondacks up here, North Country, as I guess they call it. I'm actually kind of improvising here, but I'm almost more knowledgeable about the state of New York than Cynthia Nixon is, and I've only been there about 4 times. So, I mean, I guess that makes me equally. Ironically, that's another reason Tarl Warwick would probably be a much better governor of Vermont than Cynthia Nixon would be governor of New York, because Tarl Warwick is unbelievably familiar with his own state. I don't really. I live in Ohio. I don't really travel around that much. I'm a little bit of a shut in, but to say, for somebody to say, and she's running for governor of the whole state. She's not running for the governor of the island of Manhattan like she probably would want to. She is basically. She's alienating the rest of the state. That newspaper that I featured was the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. So, it's really going to be an interesting race from here on out, because Cynthia Nixon, she has the momentum from a lot of the progressive voting base of the state of New York, but she's also going to she's basically going to alienate a lot of people outside of New York City. But I think she is going to gain a lot of the voters in the city. And that's why I think it's dangerous for Governor Cuomo to think that he's going to win the race, just because she's not going to win a lot of votes in upstate New York. I think she's going to win enough votes that there will be an insurgent candidacy. There's something called fusion tickets in New York, where different parties can cross endorse candidates. So Cuomo has had the endorsement of the Democratic Party and I think Working Families Party and the Women's Equality Party. Well, now he's going to have to qualify for the endorsement of 2 of those parties. Because they want ballot access in the state. They want ballot access in the state so that they can run candidates without having to look for signatures for other races that are either statewide or for the state legislature. So he's going to have a rough time. I think Larry Sharpe is going to be able to run a credible campaign. Cuomo's still the front runner, though. He's the front runner, first of all, because he's the incumbent. Second of all, because unfortunately, Cuomo is backed by a ton of money. It's just obscene. I think he has like $32 million in total donations. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Tarl Warwick, I think he'd make a fantastic governor, fantastic politician in many levels of government. And he's definitely got a chance to win in Vermont. A state of 650,000 residents, and not all of them are of voting age. So let's say that it's 450,000 of them are over the age of 18. He could really put a huge dent just by using his internet presence, and a lot of people don't vote. So even better. In fact, he could probably. I mean, look, being a scholar as he is, I think he will try to run a smart campaign and basically make it about promoting his issues. He's not going to be one of these people who are like, well, we're going to run on people being too dumb to go out and vote. because I don't think that's going to work, even in Vermont. But we'll see what happens, and I'm definitely going to keep following. And there's no polls out in Vermont yet either. So and they have a very limited media, and they have a very strong alternative media, which will probably be swamped by requests to talk about him, because he's one of the most famous people in the state right now. That's about it. Talk to you guys later.